So today I'm going to read you a story from the Arabian Nights. This one is called Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves. In a faraway town in Persia, there lived a hard-working man called Ali Baba. He earned his living by cutting wood in a nearby forest and selling it at the town market. Next door to Ali Baba lived his cousin Qasim. He was quite wealthy, so he had no need to work at all, and as a result, he grew idle. He was also greedy and envious of others who had more money than himself. One day, as Ali Baba was loading some wood onto his donkeys, he noticed a group of horsemen in the distance, riding toward them in a great cloud of dust. They look like dangerous types, he thought, so he shooed away the donkeys and climbed a nearby tree to hide. Perhaps they are the bandits I've heard about, the ones they call the 40 Thieves, he wondered. It said that they hide their loot in the forest. They were indeed. The thieves dismounted from their horses close to where Ali Baba was hiding, shouldered their heavy sacks, and gathered in front of a rock face as sheer and flat as a wall. Their captain stepped up to the wall and commanded, "Open sesame!" Instantly, a door appeared in the rock, and it opened. Ali Baba watched in amazement as the thieves hurried through the opening, which closed behind them. He remained hidden in the tree until the door reappeared and opened again, and the thieves strode out, having left their loot in the cave. The captain raised his arm and said, "Close, sesame!" and the door in the rock closed again, leaving no trace behind. As soon as the thieves rode away, Ali Baba scrambled down from his hiding place and called his obedient donkeys back. Thinking about what he had just seen, he began to wonder, if I do as the captain did, will the door reappear? After all, I know the magic words now too. Without further ado, he raised his arms and cried, "Open sesame!" and would you believe it? The door in the rock face opened. Inside, he found a veritable treasure trove, piled high with sacks of gold, fabulous jewels, silverware, and bullion. The cave was obviously the secret storehouse of those notorious thieves. What a discovery! Ali Baba could not believe his good fortune. He carried 3 sacks of gold to the door, which had closed behind him, and cried, "Open sesame!" "I'm no thief," he told himself, "but I see no wrong in taking what thieves have already stolen." He carried the sacks out of the cave and loaded them onto his patiently waiting donkey. Then he said, "Close, sesame!" and the door closed and vanished into the rock face. Satisfied, Ali Baba drove his donkeys home. Ali Baba's wife could hardly believe his story, but when he emptied the sacks and coins onto the floor, she shrieked for joy and fell on her knees to count them. "There are too many for you to count, dear wife," he told her. "You had better go next door and borrow a measuring scoop." So she went and asked Qasim's wife to lend her one, but the woman was suspicious. "What have they got to measure by the scoopful?" she wondered. She went into the kitchen to fetch the scoop, but, being crafty, she secretly put some sticky honey at the bottom of it. "We shall soon find out," she murmured to herself. And so she did. When the scoop was returned, she found a gold coin stuck in the honey. That evening she showed it to her husband. "Look at this, Qasim. That cousin of yours, Ali Baba, is a cheat. He pretends to be poor, yet he measures his gold by the scoopful. How can this be?" Qasim was filled with such furious envy that he stormed next door then and there to demand an answer. Ali Baba, being good-natured and trusting, told his cousin all about the treasure, including the words to open the hidden door. What's more, he even offered to share the riches with Qasim if he kept them secret. But Qasim had no intention of sharing with anyone, not even Ali Baba. Earlier the next morning, he set out with 6 mules, carrying sacks he intended to fill with treasure. When he arrived at the place Ali Baba had described, he called out, "Open sesame!" The door again appeared in the rock face and opened. He went in, and the door closed behind him. Cassim trembled with excitement at the sight of the treasure, but there was no time to lose. In a frenzy of greed, he dashed to and fro, dragging great bags of loot to the door until he was in such a state that he forgot the magic words to open them again.
"It's something to do with seeds, that I know, but what? Open sunflower? Open hayseed? Open poppy seed?"
It was no good. He couldn't think of any more seeds, and all the while the door remained firmly shut. Cassim did not know what to do and collapsed in despair. He was still slumped in a sorry heap among the treasure, when some time later he heard the ominous sound of horses' hooves approaching. Panic seized him when a harsh voice called outside the cave, "Open sesame!" The door flew open and the captain of the 40 thieves strode in, sword in hand. "Hands up, you miserable thief!" he cried. "I saw your mules outside, and now I see you plan to steal our treasure." As Cassim trembled in fear, the captain put up his sword. "You shall come with us. We lost one of our band, and you will have to do to make our number up to 40 again." They tied Cassim's hands behind his back and put him on one of his own mules, then rode him back to the hideout. To make the best of his situation, Cassim decided to pander to his captors.
"I know a man named Ali Baba who has already been to your cave and robbed you," he said. "If you treat me well, I will show you where he lives."
Hearing this, the captain began to brood. "So this thief has an accomplice who knows our secret, has he? We must get rid of this Ali Baba, and soon. But how?" By the time they reached their hideout, he had worked out a plan. The captain gave his orders. "Tomorrow morning, take Cassim's mules to the town and find 40 oil jars and 14 more mules, to make 20, to carry them. Fill one of the jars with oil, then bring them all back here." By the afternoon of the following day, everything was ready. "Now," said the captain to his band, "get into these jars, you too, Cassim, and the last one of you load them onto the mules in pairs. Once you are inside, don't show yourselves or make a sound. Just wait for my further instructions." That evening, the captain led a line of 20 mules up the hill to Ali Baba's house. The mules each carried 2 oil jars, and hidden inside all but one of them was a thief. The captain, disguised as an oil merchant, bowed to Ali Baba, who was sitting outside enjoying the fine evening air. "I have come a long way to sell my oil at tomorrow's market, sir," said the pretend merchant, "but it is now too late to find lodging. If you would kindly give us shelter for the night, I would be very much obliged to you." Ali Baba, who did not recognize the captain in his disguise, obeyed the rules of hospitality. He had arranged for the oil jars to be unloaded in the yard and for the mules to be fed, watered, and stabled for the night. Then, with a solemn bow, he invited the pretend oil merchant into his house. He could not do enough for the unexpected guest, who, little did he know, had plans to kill him. Ali Baba's son, Ahmed, joined them to enjoy a delicious meal prepared by their cook, Morgiana. She was a very clever girl and a loyal servant. She was suspicious of this so-called oil merchant, and she decided to keep her eye on him. After supper, the oil merchant excused himself and went out to the yard. He whispered to each of his men in the jars, "2 knocks on your jar. Attack at midnight. 3 knocks. Wait until sunrise." From her hiding place in the shadows, Morgiana heard every word. "So that's what he's up to," she gasped. "Those infamous 40 thieves are hidden in those jars, and they intend to attack my master. I must do something." She quickly formed a plan to save Ali Baba and crept unseen out of the house and ran down the station out of the city to speak to the chief of guards. Sir, if you bring a platoon of guards to the bridge at sunrise, you will catch the notorious bandits you've been hoping to arrest for so long, the ones known as the 40 Thieves. At 11 o'clock, the pretend oil merchant sneaked out to the yard again and crept from one oil jar to the next, knocking twice on each, a signal for an attack at midnight. Clever Morgiana saw this too, and what did she do? She waited a short while and tiptoed to the oil jars and knocked 3 times on each. This was the signal to wait until sunrise. So far, so good, Morgiana told herself as she went to tell Ahmed her plan. Your father's in danger, she said. The jars in the yard contain not oil but bandits, and the so-called oil merchant is their captain. They have come to kill your father. Bring some trusty friends here before dawn to help us get rid of them. Ahmed was horrified to hear this and was keen to do what Morgiana said. Shortly before sunrise, Ahmed and his friends gathered silently in the yard, ready for action. At first light, Morgiana cried, "Now!" and they rushed at the jars, tipped them over, and rolled them out through the gate. The thieves inside the jar were caught unawares and cried out in fear and alarm. Inside the street, the jars gathered speed, rolling faster and faster down the hill. As they bounced over the cobbles, the cries of the terrified bandits were loud enough to wake the town. A crowd quickly gathered as people were drawn by the strange sight of yelling oil jars hurtling downhill. Ali Baba himself ran out into the street to see what was going on. All the while, a platoon of city guards was waiting down by the bridge. At the bottom of the hill, the jars crashed into a heap at the bridge and broke in pieces. The 40 thieves spilled out this way and that way, so dizzy that they could hardly get to their feet. The guards took advantage of this and pounced on the dazed bandits, put them in chains, and marched them smartly off to jail, with the treacherous Kasim among them. When Ali Baba was told of how clever Morgiana had discovered the thieves inside the jars and devised a plan to get rid of them, he kissed her and thanked her for saving his life. "You shall have a large reward," he said, "and become part of my family." "Thank you, sir," Morgiana replied. "But may I humbly remind you that the captain of the thieves, the fake oil merchant, is still at large? I suggest we look for him at the cave with the secret door." Morgiana was right, as usual. When the captain saw what had happened, he realized that his plans lay in ruins. He fled to the secret cave, taking 3 of Ali Baba's donkeys with him and throwing off his disguise on the way. When he was safely inside, the door closed behind him. He decided to wait until it was dark, when he would make his escape with as much loot as the donkeys could carry. Ali Baba, meanwhile, took Morgiana's advice, and together they drove to the cave in the donkey cart. Seeing the stolen donkeys waiting nearby, they knew that the captain must be hiding inside. "Be ready, everyone," whispered Morgiana as they surrounded the secret door in the rock face. Ali Baba raised his arms and called out in a loud voice, "Open sesame!" The door opened and the thieves' captain burst out of the cave, sword in hand. But Ahmed tackled him so well that the bandit fell flat on his face. Ali Baba snatched the sword away from him, and Morgiana tied his hands behind his back. And so the captain was caught and duly taken to join his 40 thieves in prison. Ali Baba and his friends were safe at last, and wealthy too. Morgiana and Ahmed declared their love for one another, and in a very short time they were married with much celebration. Thus they lived together in great happiness, and continued to keep with Ali Baba the secret of open sesame. The end.